Okay, good afternoon or good day everybody. I just wanted to talk about recent events in relation to the publicised, or negatively publicised should I say, deportation of 29 Jamaicans last week, Wednesday the 6th of February. I wanted to speak, I'm not an activist, I'm not a social, I'm not a political activist who wants to who has an agenda. I'm speaking my own truth based on the fact that I'm married to one of the deportees that was on board of that plane last week. This was my husband. He arrived in the UK in 1997, and in 2001 we got married and we had 2 children. My son is 12 and my daughter is 16. In June 16 he was incarcerated. He made some poor choices and served a sentence of 1 year and 8 months. He was released in February 18 to a detention centre. He was in the detention centre from February 18 until we were able to get him out on the August the 18th of last year. I want to speak a bit about the conditions inside of a detention centre for those that may not be aware. And these are coming from my husband's input. I'm told that there are more drugs inside of the detention centre, drugs such as spice, than there are in the prisons. And for those of you that don't know about spice or the impact of spice, I invite you to do your own research. But from what I'm told, he explained people as walking around in a zombie-like form. Most people, most days, walking around in a zombie-like form to the point they were unable to work their way into their own room and function in any level. He talked about being banged up at 9 o'clock. He actually said that the conditions in a detention centre are worse than that of a prison. Visiting was restricted. We were only able to visit between certain hours, and obviously they were banged up at 9 o'clock until the following morning. There were food restrictions, so we were unable to provide our family with, or the detainees with, any cultural foods or any foods that kind of helped them to feel as though they were, existing in a culturally sensitive manner. We were told that they could purchase items, so toiletries and toiletries such as soaps and toothpastes. We were unable to provide for them, so any other home comforts. They were only able to have a few items of clothes, so maybe a couple of pairs of jeans, a couple of tops and a couple of pairs of shoes, and every other item they were expected to purchase within the centre. There were different locations for the detention centres, and they were moved around on a regular basis. So we spent the last period of time whilst he was in detention going up and down different parts of the country. If he ever presented to try and get bail to come out, he'd have to attend the court with his clothes in a bag, and if he was successful then he would come home, and if he was not successful then he was most likely transferred to another detention centre. There were a few detention centres that again you can do your research on. When I was trying to identify which particular detention centre my husband was at one particular time, and I googled Harmondsworth, I think it was, the headline came up as the number of suicides that had taken place inside those detention centres. Another detention centre he was held at was in Gatwick, and for any of those that are not familiar with that resort, that particular detention centre is situated literally on the runway. And so as you can imagine, the planes that were coming and going at all parts of the day and night, and the emotional impact that had on the detainees is something that only I can't imagine, not being inside. But what I can say is that my husband often spoke about the detainees' emotional well-being, the feelings of wanting, suicidal feelings. He spoke once about a time when the person in the cell next to him attempted suicide, and he and another person who discovered him pulled him down, took something from around his neck and settled him, and called a member of staff, who then checked on him and then asked if they could keep an eye on him for the balance of the evening. Eventually we were able to successfully get him to come out on bail, and that was without the, we had to, I had a number of extortionate solicitors' fees that we had to pay to get us through the process of applying. But eventually when he came out, he had to sign on a weekly basis, and so for most of the people that have to come out and sign, and there were a number of them, we had to sign on a weekly basis, took him over to Heathrow each week. He was not allowed to claim benefits, obviously, and he wasn't entitled to any financial support from the state, so that kind of came from family and friends. On this particular occasion, I took him to sign on, and waited for a couple of hours until finally 2 officers came out and said that they had intentions of deporting my husband. And this took place, he came out in August 18, and he was at home until January 19 signing, and then at some point in January 19 he was detained again with no understanding or no kind of real explanation other than to say he was potentially being deported. And we kind of went back to the same signing on and the stress of having to kind of get the children to come and visit him in those facilities, which were ill prepared for family. Let's go to the morning of the 6th, well actually the night of the 5th of February, which was the day before he was deported. So his solicitors were arguing that there was a potential that he may not get deported, and it wasn't clear to him that he was actually going to be deported on the 6th. I was told by the solicitor to bring a suitcase on the off chance that he might be deported, which I did. And when I arrived on the 5th to the detention centre with my children, I was told that I had 5 minutes to let the children say goodbye, and also to pack what he needed because his suitcase was overweight, because they counted the belongings that he had inside, which was, as I said, a couple of pairs of jeans and a couple of t-shirts. So if you can imagine the stress of my children having to be informed for the first time that there was a reality that their dad may be deported. And this was on a Tuesday night, and we had no confirmation, and we were given no information, and neither was my husband, as to whether or not that flight with him was going to take place, because we'd heard that some people had received last minute reprieves. On the early hours of Wednesday morning, around about 3:30, I received a call from my husband to tell me that he'd been taken and he was on a coach. He was near Heathrow, but he'd been taken past Heathrow, and he was a bit confused and disorientated as to how far and where he was going, and that information wasn't shared with him. But what he did say is he was approached in his cell by 8 officers who were ex-army officers that generally work in these detention centres, and they had riot shields on and headgear, and got him out of his sleep. To the point he said, well, I'm coming, I'm not resisting, so I'm not sure why there needs to be 8 of you. Anyway, him and the other 28 detainees were taken, and he was put in handcuffs, and some of them were put in handcuffs and in chains. He explained that although they were on the plane, the other members of the detainees were shackled from waist down. Anyway, they arrived into Jamaica eventually, and you may or may not have seen the following day the headlines that showed that 29 foreign criminals under the umbrella of being murderers and rapists were boarded onto a flight which landed in Jamaica. And at the other end, in Jamaica, they were taken to a holding place or a police to be processed, and then literally just dispersed into the streets. I could see my husband amongst others trying to kind of familiarise themselves with where they are, what's happened to them, and make sense of this, make sense of why it happened, and with no money. He had no money. He had a few belongings because I was unable, in that 5 minutes that I had, I was unable to think and prepare what he would practically need after 20 years and going into a country which was foreign to him. For another 24 hours, other than seeing images of him in Jamaica going into a car, for another 24 hours I was unable to locate him. I really kind of am bringing this to the public because since my family's experienced this, I've had a number of calls, contacts from people who have been impacted, people who have been outraged by the conditions and the way in which these detainees have been dealt with, but also people who have said that they have similar stories, or that they have people that they are trying to get leave to remain in this country. The process for getting leave to remain in this country is tiresome, it's draining, and it's very, very expensive and unsupported. As I said, from 2001 to currently 2019, we were unable to secure permanent leave to remain, and that meant that for the vast majority of that time he wasn't entitled to work and he wasn't entitled to claim benefits, and he relied very heavily on the resources that were available from me, who's paid into society and I've actually worked for over 35 years paying tax and maintaining my two children. So I feel that the system's failed us. I'm hoping that this blog will show some light into the issues that I think are being swept under the carpet and buried, and I hope that anybody else that's going through this can perhaps seek the right advice or speak to the right people, or keep telling the story, and hopefully the community will get behind and expose the way in which a lot of our people who are coming over are treated. I really value your support, and I would appreciate if you could continue to repost this, and let's bring this out into the community. Thank you.